Hi, Nicholas. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sherry. Super happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Always good to see you.
So good to see you too. And I think this is long overdue. We did, I think, a live last year where we were running a challenge together. I think we were running a YouTube challenge together, and you supported me through a lot of the important mindset conversations that we were having. And so I think it's finally due that we now have a conversation because you have one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard and encountered. And you are the walking and full expression of what it really is to rewrite your story. And so before we begin, maybe I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself first.
Well, my name is Nicholas Gross. I'm from Brighton, Michigan. It's like a small little suburb of Detroit, about 40 minutes west of Detroit. Yeah, I've had quite a bit of life experience, both good and bad, pretty extremes on each of those. Yeah, and I believe that the ability to rewrite our story, like you say, it is very important. And a lot of times people don't realize that they have that ability, and they just kind of take on the story that's almost kind of given to them as they go through life. So yeah, I'm kind of in the mindset coaching space, along with you, and I think it's very important. It's that's me and kind of why I'm here.
Yeah, and the other part that you didn't mention is that we're doing a lot of projects together. We are running some courses together right now. We're launching and just launched a program called Make Peace with Food, and you're support coaching that, and you'll be support coaching in our retreat this November, Transformation in Paradise, as well as the Hit Dex app. So there's a lot coming, and we're going to be hearing a lot more of you. And I just want to come back to this one thing I notice about you, this thing that I admire so much is you're probably the most positive person I've ever met. And you have this thing where every single time I call or I'm talking to you and I'm freaking out over something, you always find a way to just diffuse that. And you always find what's great about this moment. And even though sometimes that makes me angry because I just want to express what I'm feeling and the aggression I'm feeling, you still have this ability to just, well, here's what it is. Well, we just got to accept it and we just got to move on and everything's going to be okay. And it's so nice to have that wise counsel in my life, I have to say. And I so admire that in you. And I want to be more like that. And I believe a big reason for that is because of your story and because what you're about to share. And I also want to add that I think this is the first time that you've actually shared this publicly in a space like this. And so I absolutely appreciate that so much. And I feel so grateful and feel so honored to be having this conversation today. And I think the first time I really met you was some years ago. I know we had kind of known each other online for a little bit. We were connected in the same group, but we met in person at an event called Life with Rock Thomas. And it was a big group of people from an M1 tribe. And that was also the first time I had ever heard your story. And it completely blew my mind because from the outside, you are this composed person. You're super calm. You're super grateful. You're so successful. You're just so cool to be around. But then you have this backstory that really, I think, just blew me away when I heard that day. So if you're open to it, Nicholas, I would love to hear your story.
Sure. I appreciate the compliments there. I have always kind of had that positive, like look at the bright side, cup half full mindset and tendency naturally ever since I can remember. I've been like that. And then also through other masterminds and doing that consciously, I've strengthened that muscle. And it's like anything else, it's a muscle that we can strengthen if we practice it. And I definitely remember that day at that event. I thought you already knew that story, but you didn't. So back in 2013, I was in a motorcycle accident. I had what most would call a binge-drinking habit, as did my fiancée. And one night we were out on a date night on the Harley on a motorcycle, and we didn't make it back. We ended up in an accident on the way home, and she didn't make it through that accident, and I barely did. I was in the hospital for a very long time, lots of hardware in my face, bones hanging out of my elbow, leg broken in half, fractured my C2. Um, Lots of almost kind of learning to walk and stuff again. Lots of surgeries, lots of trauma there. Not just to my body physically, but psychologically as well. I felt very responsible for the loss of, the love of my life, and that was very hard to get through. And on top of that, as soon as I got out of the hospital, since there was alcohol involved in that accident, the legal side started to kick in.
Mm.
And long story short, I was sentenced to 2.5 to 15 years in prison. Never been in trouble for anything before. Never been in jail, before. And that was quite a culture shock. But even through all that, I still maintained that positive mindset. When I was incarcerated, when I was in prison for those 2.5 years, I refused to let that time be a waste of time.
Mm.
I learned as much as I could about real estate. I was working out every day. I was reading books, taking classes if I could in there. They actually had a music program in there, so I was in a few little bands. Kind of a little cool side story. The warden, the sergeant who ran the prison, is friends with the guitar player from Alice Cooper, Ryan Roxy. And he came in to do a guitar clinic, and I got to jam with him a little bit. And just to say, just as an example, like that's another way that I made that terrible negative situation, found something cool in there, right? That mindset of not letting that be a waste of time, and not I set here's another thing that really made that time go by fast. I set goals for myself.
Mm.
Right, and okay, by the time I get out, I want to be able, and most of them were around working out. So all right, I want to be able to run this far by the time I get out. I want to be able to do this many pull-ups by the time I get out. And what that did was kind of shift my mindset into where I was running out of time.
Mm.
Holy crap, they're going to kick me out of here. You know what I mean? I better hurry up and get this goal out of here before they kick me out. So that was a big shift. As opposed to there's a lot of people in there crossing off days every day. Crossing the day off their calendar. Oh, there's another one down. There's another one down. And that, I could just see it in them. It made the time drag on so long for them.
Right.
As opposed to, looking at it positively, setting goals, looking for things in there to make it more of a positive experience and not just a total waste of time.
Right.
That kind of make sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that was an incredible share, and I want to honor you so much for sharing your story. And I absolutely felt the emotions every time. And I probably heard this story, I don't know, countless times right now, but every time you share, I just feel the emotions of what you've experienced, and I can only imagine what that was like to go through. And I think my first question around that is this sense of responsibility. So obviously you took ownership of what happened, and there was a massive sense of responsibility over what had happened and how the events played out. And I'm just curious where you stand today. Do you still feel responsible for what happened, or have you come to a place where you've made peace with it because in some ways it was supposed to be this way?
Yeah, a little of both. It was definitely at first all on me. It was there was no car that pulled out in front of me. We were on a road that we had both ridden on millions of times. We were right around the corner from the house,
Right.
Just got a little overconfident one day. We like to take the corners kind of fast and lean over far. That's kind of like what makes motorcycle riding fun. But I also have a tendency to push the limits. And that day, I pushed them a little too far. Like I said, there was no car that pulled out in front of me. There was nothing else to blame it on other than myself. So I absolutely felt 100% responsible. Not just to her, but I mean her parents. I feel like I let her parents down. Like that was my job, was to protect her, and she had her son, who was 6, just turning 7 at the time, and I felt responsible for all of that, and that put such a heavy burden on myself mentally. But since then, as I've kind of got more into the spiritual world, where I wasn't at all before, I do have this trust in the universe, and that everything happens for a reason.
Mm.
Everything happens just the way that it's supposed to. And even though it's really hard to find what that reason is, when it seems like there is no reason, eventually it'll uncover itself.
Right.
So now I do have a lot more, I don't know, clarity. I don't have such a burden on myself. Still, it's something I think about every day. Sure, I don't think that'll ever go away. But that the level of responsibility and almost punishment that I was putting on myself, I was able to relieve some. And even just the process of going to prison and all that is like, okay, like, yes, I screwed up, but I've done my time. You know what I mean? I've paid for it. I still pay for it. It's something like I said, think about every day. But I'm able to move on now.
Right.
And continue with my life. Otherwise, now it's 2 lives ruined.
Right. Wow, that's huge, and that's so incredibly profound. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're moving to this place of acceptance. And I think a lot of us have a really hard time to release things that have happened in the past, and especially something super traumatic where you feel responsible, where you would do anything to go back and maybe change a situation or make a different decision. And so how do we move to that place of acceptance where we are so completely in surrender of what happened, knowing that we can't change a situation and we can only move forward from now? Because you say this, and you say this with such certainty, and you say this with so much belief, but I'm sure you have your days where you struggle with accepting what happened.
Absolutely. It's not something that happens overnight. I mean, this happened in 2013. It's 2023 now. It's been 10 years. I mean, so it's a process, and it was years before I could even start to accept that. And it wasn't until I started to get into spirituality and stuff like that I started to kind of learn the tools and gain the skills to practice to kind of move forward. I was stuck for a very long time.
Right.
But yeah, it's certainly nothing that happens overnight. It's a process. It takes practice. And consistency over time. Again, it's like another muscle, right? You have to exercise it and stick with it. If I don't, I do catch myself sometimes kind of starting to slip back into that, and then I have to remind myself,
Right.
that everything happens for a reason, and the whole acceptance thing. And acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with it. You know what I mean? It's just accepting it as a fact, as
Right.
it is, just like gravity. We learn to accept gravity. That's just what it is.
Right.
And when there's a big traumatic experience like that, that's what it is. I believe that nothing's either good or bad until we put a meaning to it.
Mm.
And and we have a choice of what meaning we put to it. Which can be hard to do in the moment, but once we have some time and can kind of separate ourselves from the event, then we can kind of assign our own meaning to it, and then we can start to accept it and kind of slowly work through things as we go. Journaling helped a lot. Meditation helped a lot. Visualization. All that spiritual kind of stuff, and having mentors and
Right.
talking about it. Even just sharing my story like this helps.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that when it first had happened, you were almost punishing yourself. So by holding yourself responsible, holding yourself accountable, and reliving the scenario over and over and over again in your mind. And then now you're sharing that you're working towards acceptance, and this is something that you have to work on every single day. So I'm curious, at what point did you decide that you no longer want to continue to punish yourself over what happened? Because it seems like you chose to better yourself. You chose to involve yourself in different projects that excite you and ways to help others, and really try to fully expand yourself during your time here in life, instead of spend the rest of your life self-judging, self-deprecating, beating yourself up over what happened, and ultimately putting yourself in a place of constant suffering. Because many of us go through these experiences in life, we can't release them, maybe we don't accept them fully, or even if we do accept them, we still feel like we're trapped in that guilt of what happened, and we still have to continue to suffer because that's just what we deserve. So I'm curious how you were able to move on from that, or if there was that pivotal moment that actually brought you to that place of acceptance and choosing to better your life instead of stay in that place of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a long period of time where that self-punishment, it was basically like PTSD. Like there was almost a year where I couldn't even close my eyes to go to sleep without hearing the motorcycle and hearing the sound of scraping on the road, and like hearing and just totally reliving it like it was happening now. So it was a long time, and I honestly couldn't tell you what started to diminish that, and then kind of over time, those episodes like that PTSD became farther and farther in between, and then I mean, it hardly happens at all now. So like that aspect of it, I don't know if it's all the other work that I was doing, and the positive mindset and stuff like that helped with that. But it wasn't until a couple years after I got out and off of parole until I started to hit that turning point where I wasn't punishing myself anymore. And it was kind of one of those rock bottom points. Like I got out, I was happy I was out. I did really well on parole and stuff, but I had this feeling like I couldn't connect with anybody. And I was a very isolated, even though I was out and around people, like I was very isolated because I couldn't connect with anybody on any sort of level. Like it was very awkward to even like say hi to somebody, passing them in the street or anything. So it was almost kind of that rock bottom point, and then a combination of like feeling and knowing that I survived that accident for a reason, and wanting to find out what that reason was. And then I started to that's when I got into personal development. I started listening to Tony Robbins on my way to work every morning, and people like Joe Dispenza and all these other gurus and personal development people. That's when I found M1 and Rock Thomas, where that's the group that we met in. And a lot of the kind of mindset exercises, and again, that's where I got into the spirituality.
Right.
That's when everything started to turn. So it wasn't for a long time. And even then, once I hit that turning point, it was again a long time and a process and consistency and sticking with it to get me to where I am now.
Right.
For sure.
Oh. Wow, that's so intense. This one thing that you said, and I'm going to paraphrase the way that you said it, but it was around there was a reason why I survived, because truly you were rescued that day, and you're almost a walking miracle. And I don't know if you realize this, you would have had the same fate that day had things maybe been slightly different, like millimeters different. And you were spared for a reason. And you were almost paralyzed from the neck down. That could have been the result of that injury. I know you had a head trauma also. So when you think about the situation, and yes, you walked out with surgeries and there was a lot of complications and there was sentencing time. However, you really came out of it almost rebirthed in some ways. And I just love your perspective so much, because it's truly something that we can all listen to and admire and really learn from, because I think most of us get stuck in that place in the past. And I just see your past behavior and especially what led up to the accident as something that many of us have a very hard time releasing. And we've started our program Make Peace with Food, and this is what we talk about. We talk about how there's generally a trigger that gives rise to an emotion due to the thoughts that the trigger gave us, and that leads to an action that oftentimes is self-sabotaging. And so we use certain substances to override that emotion. It's a dysregulated emotion. It could be food, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be shopping, gambling, porn, whatever. You insert that vice. But I'm curious as to, if we go back right now in time, before the accident, why were you behaving in that or engaging in that self-sabotaging behavior? Why was binge drinking something that was part of your behavior? Have you ever had a moment to look back at what that gave you, or why you turned to alcohol at times when you found yourself maybe feeling more out of control?
Sure. That's a great question. Pre-accident, I started drinking at a pretty young age, much before legal age. And it kind of became a habit there, and really it became a crutch, right? It became social lubricant. If I was nervous about going to meet some new people, at a party, well, have a few beers and you're good to go. And it really became this tool, right? And like you say, it's the same whether it's food or any other substance or gambling or an activity. It actually does serve a purpose. And then once you figure out what that purpose is, you kind of creates kind of clarity around like why I'm doing this in the first place. But for me, it was very much a social crutch. I used it to celebrate. I used it when I was upset. And anytime I had extreme emotions, one way or the other, it balanced me out. And then I got to college, and it got even worse because now everybody's partying, and if we follow any of the human needs, one of them is significance, right? Well, that was very much how I got my significance. And any addiction, as you might hear Tony Robbins say, serves three of those human needs. And a massive one for me was significance. That's how I got my significance, because at these big college parties, it's almost a competition of who can drink the most, right? And I always viewed myself as kind of a smaller person. I'm 5'6". I was probably 130 pounds at the time, and I was out drinking these, 6'4", 200-pound guys, and it was my way of leveling the playing field and yeah, getting that significance. I used to win the beer pong tournaments all the time and all that. So even though I knew it was hurting me, it was kind of a self-sabotaging behavior. It was serving that purpose and I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't realize that for many, many years later.
Right.
After the accident.
Right.
When I started getting into all this mindset stuff, I was able to see like, okay, that was actually serving a purpose. And I noticed the patterns that led to that. And then I could interrupt that pattern with something more serving, more serving.
Right.
Yeah. Did that answer the question at all?
Yeah, I did. I was just hoping you were going to add more. I could just sit and listen to you talk because it's everything you're saying, it just makes so much sense. And I know we talk a lot about this in Make Peace with Food as well, and about how this self-sabotaging habit is serving a particular purpose. And when we reverse engineer to the thoughts and to try to understand what the trigger is, we can then reprogram the mind. And so this is something we talk about often, is how if we're going to overcome these behaviors, we have to reprogram the mind, which means reprogramming exactly what you said, the meaning of the life events that we've had or the life experiences that we've had, so that we do in interrupt the pattern. And when we realize that the brain is just constantly running this pattern over and over again, and that it's subconsciously implanted, and that it just becomes this behavior that can be interrupted if we bring it into consciousness, if we bring it into awareness, then it's super and incredibly empowering. And so I'm curious, when you did come out of jail and after parole and all that, did you come back to drinking? Because I know right now you don't drink, so I know this about you. And I'm curious as to how you got to that moment where you decided that alcohol no longer served you and is no longer a part of your life.
Mm-hmm. It was almost an experiment when I got out. And it kind of goes along with like your environment, you know, and what's going on around you. And, you know, you see everybody else doing it. And it's like, so my thought process was, okay, I'm going to try this. You know, I think that I can have one and be fine, you know, and I was for a long time, you know, probably a couple years. And then I told myself right off the bat, if I ever notice myself kind of going down that same path again, I'm going to be done, and that's it. I'm never going to do it ever again. And I kept that promise to myself, and for a year, maybe 2 years, it was fine. You know, have one, you know, just hanging out with people, maybe camping or whatever, social. But sure enough, a couple of years later, I found myself kind of craving it more. And having more than I wanted to, and then maybe waking up not feeling so good the next day, and one day I woke up and I'm like, wow, man, I just noticed myself going down that same path again, and I'm like, I know exactly where this leads, and I am not going down that path again.
Wow.
Right? So it's kind of like in Make Peace with Food, we talk about that behavioral chain,
right?
And noticing where we are in that behavioral chain and interrupting that pattern. Well, it was basically a huge scale of that, right. You know, I mean, talking like years. And even stretched out like that, I thankfully was able to catch myself before it turned into, you know, something negative. I caught it, you know, before it did. I didn't get out of control or anything like I did when I was younger. But I just noticed myself like wanting it more than I wanted to, and kind of heading down that path, even though it was the very beginning of that path. I was able to catch myself and stop. And really, the whole reason that started in the first place, kind of to go back to the last question too, was not having the tools and strategies to deal with either situations or in life or emotions. Like I said, either really good or really bad. So in order to stop that, you stop using that as my crutch and as my tool, right? I was using it as a tool, basically. I had to implement and learn other strategies first, which goes to kind of the rule of addition before subtracting,
right.
That we talk about. In order to subtract something, we want to add something first.
Right.
So, okay, I need some tools, you know, some mental, psychological tools and strategies and stuff to handle life, right? Other than numbing them with alcohol or anything else, you know, or avoiding them, whatever it is. So really, it took implementing those other tools and strategies and practice over time to really master them before I could eliminate the alcohol for good, you know, once and for all. And it's like I said, same thing around, you know, binge eating or smoking or gambling or sex or, like you say, gossip or any of this other stuff. It's all the same. It's a tool that we use, an outlet, a distraction, something to numb what's really going on or avoid what's really going on in our lives, some kind of disruption internally. It's an internal problem. Right. In the alcohol, the problems that we come up with are a symptom. And a lot of times we try to treat that symptom rather than the internal problem that's going on. Right. So it was kind of that clarity. I had kind of one day again through all the personal development, uncovered that kind of got a peek behind the scenes of what was really going on there, and I was able to, you know, make that sustainable change. Right.
Yeah, so well said. And the programming that drives binge eating or emotional eating or stress eating or boredom eating is the same programming that drives the binge drinking and the turning to pot or weed whenever we're not feeling like we're able to sit in the emotion, even if the emotion is boredom. And the same,
Mhm.
so it's the same cycle. Once we understand it, we understand the way that the brain works, the way the mind works, and the way that the trigger gives the thoughts, and the thoughts give these emotions, and the emotions, if we don't know what to do with them, then we're going to have to diffuse them in a way, and the nervous system starts to kick in a way where we absolutely have no control. It is programmed for survival at that moment, and no matter what efforts we do towards our self-care, they are overridden by this program that is just seeking out survival. So incredibly important that you share this. And I could just listen to you talk for hours, because you put me in a trance, and I'm just so in awe of just your share today and just the way that you really have pieced it together, because I feel like I'm talking to a very different person than maybe who was the person that drove that motorcycle 10 years ago. I feel like you are two completely different people. And it just astonishes me, because actually earlier today I had a client come in, and she came in kind of complaining about a similar story that she usually comes in and shares. And so I asked her today, I said, do you mind if I challenge you? And she said, no, go ahead, you can challenge me. And then I asked her, just a pattern interrupt, I said, well, how much longer are you going to share this story? Like how many more times do I need to hear the exact same thing over and over again? And it so caught her by surprise. And of course, I did this intentionally. And I was trying to share with her, we're just running a program. When we wake up in the morning and we're like, God, the alarm clock again. And God, I'm going to drive the exact same route to work. And gosh, and it's always the exact same program with the exact same thoughts in our mind, the exact same thoughts about the day and how we can't wait till it's Friday. We're actually continuing to run that program. And until finally we interrupt that pattern, and we can introduce some new thoughts, like you said, rule of addition before subtraction, can we start to override this program? And so what would happen if we had a different story? What if my story was not about me being a victim of my circumstances all the time? Because I think we can all have this victim competition where we can all decide whose story was worse. Like we all have a story. Every single person has a story. Everyone's gone through something. And whose is worse? I don't know. Who's to judge, right? But if it's our story and we are attached to being the victim of the story and everything happens to me, not for me, then that'll constantly be my story. And I think I shared with you earlier this week when we spoke, I woke up Monday morning with a super stiff back. I haven't experienced back pain like this in some years, and I don't like to complain about it. In fact, I don't like to operate as a person who has a back problem. Like that's just what I've reprogrammed myself to do, is I don't want to be Sherry with a back problem, even though I've had surgery on my back twice, even though every now and then there's a little baseline pain that I just want to kind of ignore. I choose to be the person who is focused on all the other things in her life and not the person who's limited by what's going on with her back. And that took some time. And honestly, this is daily practice. So when somebody looks at you and says, wow, Nicholas, you're so lucky. You have such a strong mindset. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you have such a strong mindset? I bet you work on this every single day, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what is that process? How do you get yourself in that space where I need to remember to work on this every single day? Because the thoughts are there. They're going to creep up. It's going to come out of nowhere at some point where I'm going to start to go back into victim mode. But how do I flip that switch where I feel constantly in that place of empowerment?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Again, it goes back to consistency and practice over time. It's not something that happens overnight. And it's a big combination. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that I put into it. It's like a big recipe. I hired coaches, and kind of went through these mastermind programs and listened to YouTube channels and read books, and I started to implement all these things. Everything from affirmations, right? I wrote these affirmations on my bathroom mirror, so I'm looking at them every morning. Meditations, I'm doing mindset meditations and becoming grateful. There's the identity work, our identity, like the strongest force in human nature is the drive to be congruent with our identity or how we see ourselves. So that was another big practice I did, was starting to rewrite kind of my story and how I saw myself and my identity. Pre-accident, part of my identity was I was a drinker. I was a partier. In fact, I was the partier, right? Everybody just showed up to my house every weekend to party. They knew there was going to be a big, massive party going on. So I had to change that identity, right? And language, I started to watch my language. What's the language? My internal dialogue.
Right. Oof.
On top of that, again, to go back to the spiritual aspect, it's who am I?
Mm.
You know, am I Nick? Am I Nicholas Gross? Like, nope, that's my name. That's something I have. Am I this body? Nope, this body is something I have. Um, and then realizing that all I am is like I'm this consciousness that's experiencing all this. Am I my thoughts? Nope, I'm experiencing my thoughts. So even my thoughts are not me. It's something I'm experiencing. So as soon as I was able to separate myself from that, then I started to cultivate the self-love. And
Mm.
I think that's really what it all comes down to, because now I'm like, okay, like I'm this consciousness. I have this body. I have this mind. I only have one body and one mind. So I better take care of it. So that was a massive shift in like, okay, alcohol. Do I really want to be poisoning myself? Literally
Mm.
poisoning the only body that I have, the only mind that I have? No, I don't want to do that. So over time, I realized that it's incongruent with my values and not actually what I want, and self-sabotaging. And I was able to start to make different choices. Again, not overnight, but once in a while, I can make a better choice. And that choice is more and more often until it's just like, it's not even something I think about anymore. I don't have any cravings for alcohol anymore. It's just, I know that that's not what I want.
It's
It's
not
not
who you are.
it's not who I am. It's not my identity. It's not congruent with any of my values anymore.
Right.
It's like I said, I don't want to be poisoning myself. Um, so it's like a big combination of all those things is and consistency over time. I can't say that enough either.
Wow.
But there's a lot of variables in that equation to changing that mindset and cultivating that mindset and the self love.
Wow. Wow, that's so powerful. I love everything that you just said, and I want to come to this self-love place in just a moment and ask you some questions about how to harness self-love, because I think it's something we all struggle with. We're constantly in this state of not enoughness, this lack mindset, this scarcity mindset, and I truly believe self-love, as cheesy as it sounds, is really our pathway to healing and our pathway to any form of success. But coming back to the part of the identity that you shared, and one thing I always talk about is how important it is to watch the language, right? And the language specifically around saying I don't do something versus I can't do something. And so if I go to a party, and I don't drink either, Nicholas, you know that. If I go to a party and somebody offers me a glass of wine, my first reaction is, oh no, thanks, I don't drink. Oh no, thank you. Right? It's not this struggle where I'm saying, oh no, I can't have that because I'm trying to quit, or I'm on a diet, or there's too many calories, right? The can't really implies that there's a desire that I'm denying myself. And so that's a constant internal conflict, right? Because it goes against your actions and your thoughts. Your actions are one thing, your thoughts and feelings are another thing. And so what do you think of that? Just shifting into the place of I don't do this anymore. Is this something that we shift overnight and just change our language, change the words that we speak and say and confirm about ourselves? Or is this a process that you also come to?
I think that might be different for everybody. I want to say it was it didn't take long for me personally. It was pretty instant. Again, once I became aware of my language, and you nailed it. Though I don't versus I can't. That I can't, like you said, it implies that there's still a desire, and when there's something we can't have, it makes us want it even more,
Yes.
and that builds up the dopamine reward system in the brain. If we do have a slip up and have it,
Mm-hmm.
now we're rewarded even more,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes it even harder not to do it the next time.
Right.
And that's a big cycle that we see a lot of people get stuck in with any substance, even food,
Right.
or unserving behaviors. Um, that's a very, very, very important one, is that internal dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to add in there, another concept that we kind of talk about is the dialectical thinking, which is probably a brand new term for most people. But to simplify it, it's rather than thinking black and white, it's thinking black and white.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So if I do slip up, and if I do have a drink, or I do have a binge episode or whatever it is, I can accept it, right? Just like I did the gravity, or just like I did the fact that this traumatic, event happened. I can accept it, and I can recommit, and I can still stick with my values and still move forward and improve and learn from it.
Right.
That's really the big thing, is learning from it, moving forward, recommitting.
Yeah, and it's not a success or fail, right? I've stopped doing this particular thing, and then one day I had it. It's okay. I've stopped doing this particular thing, and one day I've had it. It doesn't mean that I passed or failed, or I totally screwed up, right? And I think we see this a lot in New Year's resolutions, where people are like, I'm going to train 5 days a week, and I'm going to go for a walk every single day, and then I'm never going to eat carbs again, and I'm going to hire a trainer, and then I'm going to juice every day. And there's like this long list of things. And then that one day that you forget to juice, it's like, oh man, okay, well, forget it, because I failed, because I said I was going to do all these things. Or we get ill, or we get injured, and then we can't commit the way that we said we were going to. And so it's all or none. It's black or white. And so what if it's I am injured and I am moving towards my goal, and I can do both, which means I can be flexible and I can be adaptable, and I could be in the flow of life instead of constantly being in the resistance of what is truly going on. And I think that's incredibly liberating, because we then move away from that sense of perfectionism, which most of us have constantly running in our mind. It's got to be so perfect. It's this moving target. And no matter how good we do, no matter how well we move towards that target, it's still not good enough, because it's constantly moving. And so coming back to now that part that you mentioned about self-love, how do you harness self-love? So if a person's like, Nicholas, I want to learn to love myself more. Like, what do I do? Because my whole day is thoughts about how gross I look, and I hate my body, and I can't stand my hair, and I can't stand who I am, and I failed everything in my life, and I'm so bad at everything. How do I harness self-love?
Again, that's a process. And there's a lot of variables and a lot of things you can do there. It's the language, that internal dialogue. One of our mentors once told me, I think all of us, I'm sure he told you too, the way that we talk to ourselves, like we would never talk to somebody else that way in a million years.
Right.
But why do we talk to ourselves that way? And he encouraged us to talk to ourselves like a little puppy. Right.
Right.
So one way and one aspect is to be aware of that internal dialogue, and it's a practice. Notice it. First, we have to become aware of it. We have that program running just subconsciously, all day. We're just, like you said, we're very critical, and we tend to be very hard on ourselves. We're our own worst critics. So becoming aware of that internal dialogue and starting to be more accepting of yourself. Like, okay, yes, I accept this. That doesn't mean I like where I'm at or I like what I'm doing, but I accept it, and I'm improving. I'm working on improving.
So good.
The internal dialogue is one.
So good.
A lot of gratitude meditations really helped me. Being grateful for my physical ability, my body I have, my good looks, my brain, everything. And just that act of practicing the gratitude and really talking to my body in these meditations and like thanking it, and like it's like such a good way. And it seems silly, but it did. I didn't even do that part intentionally to cultivate the self-love, but that's what happened.
Right.
So there's a couple of ways. What else is there? The other thing is the spiritual aspect, and separating myself and seeing that my body and my brain and all this is something that I have, and then wanting to take care of it is kind of the third way. So that's kind of three things that I would use all in conjunction with each other, and practice over time, and you'll start to notice small little shifts, and like you say, we try to get 1% better every day, and over time, you will cultivate that self-love.
So good, so good. I think for me, a lot of the practice also was just getting into this place where I was feeling deserving. right? I was deserving of all the good things in my life. And I remember, I don't know why for so long, like it's crazy because when I look back at, let's say, the last 10 years of my life, the amount of things that I've accomplished, the amount of things I've done, and then there was always like this voice in my mind, in the back of my mind, always telling me, oh, Sherry, you're such a loser. You still got to do more. You still haven't done much. You still need to accomplish more. Like, look where that person's at. And you should be this by now. And you should have done that by now and this and that by now. And it was this constant feeling of overwhelm that no matter what I did, I just felt like I was in this hamster wheel and never arriving at this place that I had set in the far off future where I would finally feel successful. And so I think getting in the present moment really helped me also to harness that ability to be more deserving and realizing that everything I have is a gift. So along with your gratitude practice is the fact that I can see you right now and my eyes are working and you know, I need glasses nowadays to actually be able to see the screen. But the fact that I have eyes that work is a blessing. This is not a right. This is a gift for me. And everything else in my life is a gift. My health every single day is a gift. And 2 days ago, when I woke up with a stiff back because I drove like 13 hours and 48 hours, I felt it. And it's those moments where I realize just how much of a gift it is to be pain-free, to be able to get up and walk and get up off the couch so easily without going, ugh, every time you get up. And so I think it's moments like these, just really staying in the present moment, that help you feel more deserving and harnessing that place of gratitude where you can be grateful for the tiniest little things in your life, because will you only be grateful for them the moment that they're gone? Like, why do we have to wait till that moment until finally we lose that thing to realize how lucky we actually were to be able to do all these things so freely? And so that's always been a way that always kind of grounds me. And since I've started feeling more deserving, I'm now more aware of all the amazing things that happen in my life, the amazing people that I met, such as yourself, the amazing opportunities I have, the freedom that I actually have every single day in my life. When you realize that you deserve it because you're doing good things, then more and more and more of that just comes to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great addition to that, for sure. And it can be very easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others and where we think we should be. And that's a big root of unhappiness, is not feeling like we're where we think we should be.
Right.
You know, I'm at this age, I should be doing this, and have this and this, and I'm not there, and getting caught up in all that. That's a very slippery slope there.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. And who said anyways, right? Who said by 30 this is supposed to happen, or by 40 this is supposed to happen, or you're supposed to have this house that looks like this with this many cars and this many dogs and kids and all these things. And when we think about that and we just ask ourselves, like, who said? Right? I always feel like I'm lacking. I always feel like I'm not there yet. I still have so much to do until I feel successful. But who said that? Like, where does that even come from? And I think that's some of the work that we do just around reprogramming the mind, is getting to the root of where do these triggers even come from? Like, why do I even think this way?
Yeah, and why wait until this happens to feel this way?
Yes.
Right? Once I make X amount of money, then I'll be happy.
Right.
You know, once I'm married or have kids, if that's your goal, you know, or desire, then I'll be happy.
Right.
And really, the trick is to feel those emotions first.
Yes.
Like it's already happening.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Well, I love speaking with you, Nicholas, and I'm so incredibly grateful I met you, and so incredibly grateful to have you in my life and to have you as my wise counsel and my calming energy to the normal fire that's always going on in my mind. So I'm so incredibly grateful for that. And I admire you so much for what you've gone through and just this capacity and desire that you have to help others. And I'm so incredibly grateful to be doing that alongside with you. And so as we conclude our discussion today, I want to thank you so much for being here again, and then ask you if there's anything else that you wanted to share today that you didn't have a chance to talk about yet.
I will add one more thing. And that's this concept that what we focus on expands or improves. And that goes for positive and negative things. So if we focus on, I'll use an easy example. Let's take finances, for example. If I focus on not going broke, what do you think is going to happen? My mind hears going broke.
Right.
Versus if I focus on making more money,
Mm.
now my brain hears make more money, make more money. And I'm focused on that. And so that expands. Or if it's my weight or habits or whatever it is, what we focus on expands. So I encourage people to notice and become aware on what they're focusing on.
Mm.
Is their focus around what they don't have, or is it around what they're working towards?
Mm.
Is it is their focus self-depreciating, or is their focus on the small increments on how they are improving?
So good.
So I would just encourage people to be very aware of what they're focusing on, because that's still something I catch myself with every day.
Mm.
Well, like what are my thoughts? What am I thinking? What am I focusing on? If I catch myself in a really bad mood, probably because I've been focusing on the wrong things.
Right.
Right? I've been focusing on everything that's going wrong rather than what's going right.
Right.
And like I said, it goes the other way too. If I'm having a really great day, if I'm in a really great mood, it's probably because I've been focusing on all the things that are going right. So there's another tool, another exercise in awareness that I encourage people to try on and see if it resonates with them.
So good, so good, so good. And I'm so happy you brought that up, because I think 9 out of 10 times when I start working with a new athlete and I ask them, well, what are your goals? Their response is generally what they don't want anymore. Right? So like, so what is it that you desire? Well, I don't want to feel like this anymore, and I don't want to be like this anymore, and I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't want to. Okay, that is all true things. However, what do you want? And that's super interesting, because you kept saying the word clarity. You probably said the word clarity, I don't know, 4 or 5 times so far during this interview. And when there is no clarity and you don't know what you do want, and you're always focused on what you don't want, you continue to get more of what you don't want. But when you become super hyper clear as to what it is that I want, then you have a destination, and now you can create a direction. And so thank you so much for sharing that, Nicholas. Anything else you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I'm going to leave you with that little gem there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Nicholas. And I have a feeling we'll be doing more of these together.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been great. I love these conversations.
Thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing and continue to be that beautiful lightness of being that you get to share with everyone else who is so lucky to be around you.
Will, you as well.